meeting inappropriate.
Okay. So we're doing this, this happened last time and I forgot. I just need this sheet,
Oh, yeah, these
which
chairs
is,
are nice.
you did get that.
I think if we could put a time frame on,
Yeah, we could just close it.
they're dated.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure back to when.
Okay.
Having a
Okay.
good summer.
Okay, we're going to start the meeting. It is now 6:05. I believe we have a quorum. Yes, we do. And so, let's call this meeting to order. And roll call, please. You want me to do it?
If you have it.
I will. Okay. Vern Sisson is our new board member. But he is not here yet tonight. If he gets here, that's fine, and if we don't really have him here, it's okay today because he can watch it also on TV. Pat Grant? Here. Charlie Eldridge? Ellie Fleming?
Here.
Garrett Anderson? Perry Moy?
Here.
Michelle Thimios?
Here.
Taylor Johnson? Randall Selesky?
Here.
Nancy Glissman is joining us at some point. She's on.
Here.
She has asked if she can be part of this meeting remotely, and we have said yes. I said yes. So she's here that way.
Thank you, I'm here.
Yes. So ex officio members, we do have Melissa here tonight. And we have Carolyn Campbell here tonight. Our other ex officio members have not arrived as yet and may not. Okay. So the next thing is going to be the approval of the draft minutes. And I know that I asked Pat Grant, well, she called me and said, I'm confused and I didn't see something in the minutes that I would have liked to have seen. So, Pat, go ahead and give it your all, and we'll go from there.
It was something I noticed that Charlie and I had brought up the issue of hay production and hay as a cash crop. And so it's very important that hay be considered as a cash crop, because they only mentioned corn. And corn's corn, but here, hay is a very important cash crop. And so this goes along with having large acreages be maintained without development for the sake of your hay production. So that was one of the things, that was what Charlie and I had both brought up
Okay.
the last time. And then the other time was that the other issue was Carolyn and I had both brought up safe wildlife crossings across large paved roads. And of course the splitting up or the problems with habitat contribute to all this, where you had mentioned disjointed habitat, and this sort of thing. So, which I agree with. And so that was the other idea, was that we, in England, they have passageways under the roads for the sake of frogs, and in Michigan, they have passageways under the roads for turtles, just as two examples. And so I think it's important, in view of the fact that Route 47 is being widened to be an interstate, that's all got to be taken into consideration, because there are going to be a lot of other things that go along with this widening of Route 47 that have not been addressed at all.
Yep.
And so that's it.
So does anybody have any questions yet? Would you want them into the minutes? Yes? Anybody want to say on the motion?
Make a motion?
Okay, Perry? And
Seconded.
Randy? Okay. You know where I've seen them? I've seen them long ago, but along 62, they have, in near Barrington area, they have places where they have tunnels underneath crossing for the animals. And if the animal prefers to go on top, it's taking its life in its hands, and if it goes underneath, it's okay. So, and it's not a new idea, but it's an important idea. Okay, then we have approval of the draft minutes.
So that
As
motion
amended.
was for the June 15th and June 29th minutes as amended?
Yes, I think so, yes. As amended. So I'll take an approval of the minutes as amended.
So.
Perry,
Second.
Michelle. Okay, now everybody's had a chance to look at the agenda. Do we have an approval of the agenda, or are there any changes that need to be made? Doesn't look like it. Okay, I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Now it's time for chairman's comments. I'm so excited to be into the meat of this, finally. These presentations that we're going to have tonight are going to be very important because they have to do with water and to do with ag land, and that's where we are and what we need. One of the reasons that we're doing these presentations, among other things, is so that anybody else who wants to make an inquiry on what we're doing can see these presentations as well, if they go into the meeting portal and can see what we've been doing, talking about, and the presentations that have been made, which goes right along with our seed packets that have the QR code on the back, and now with the fair, I don't know if you can see it, you can't see it behind me. Sorry, Nancy, you'll have to wait. But everybody else, this is pretty much what our booth is going to look like. It's a navy blue tablecloth along with this bright yellow runner. It's going to make a big, it will be very well, what's the word, not well lit, but it's going to be illuminated properly so everybody will get it. And then we have the jars that we're going to do with the either corn or beans or something. I'm trying to find the right color for everything. And I have one that has some wrapping around the top and a bow. Let me know if you like that better than just plain ones. And I can get that done too. But I think that we ended up with a pretty good section. Renee set up the color coding, so we would have manufacturing and we'd have industrial, we would have single family and multifamily, and we would have retail, industrial. Some of them were pretty crazy to try to get them all on those little jars, but I think they'll work out well. And as it is, the fair starts August 1st. We're going to set up on the 31st, on that Monday or Tuesday morning. We'll start setting things up and see what we have. What we did find out is that the fair doesn't start until 9 o'clock. On Tuesday, it starts at noon, so we can't even go before. We can go before that, but it's not really set up, and it isn't starting until noon. Otherwise, it always starts at 9, and it ends at 8. So these times are kind of a suggestion, but we did have to move. Charlie and Ellie is going to take 9 until noon on Saturday. Garrett, we haven't gotten in touch with yet. And we've got Pat Michelle, Nancy Glissman, Randy Zaleski on Thursday, 12 till 3. Okay. Melissa Adamson and Scott Hennings are going to take 12 till 3 on Wednesday. And we'd love to see 2 people, but we have to start asking your friends to come. We will have tickets for the people who are going to be there for the day, for a pass, so that you have a day pass. If somebody's putting in a lot of time, then I'll give them my full all 6-day pass so that they can be there more often. And, because I'm getting one anyway, anything to help the fair. So why not? And anybody who's only gonna be doing one day or only one shift will have a ticket for that day. And we'll get those out to you when we get them, I guess, would be right. Renee? We haven't gotten anything from them yet.
It'll
No.
be in the packet
When we get it, and that's gonna be sometime next week. But we do have a table. It is in the air-conditioned area. It's right near where they serve the food and ice cream. It's a very busy area. It is, again, it's air conditioning. Walk in and you've got the sheriff's department, then you have the Republican booth, then you have the Gideon Bible people, then you have us. Then there's another one, Avon and food. On the other side, I'm not sure exactly who it is, but they're usually long-term people. They've been there in those same places forever. I believe the Democrats are on the other side. Republicans are on one side and the Democrats are on the other side. You have everything very nicely balanced. So, I think that's about it, except to introduce our presenters today. Now, just to let you know that we are doing our presentations on from the Soil and Water Conservation District. We also will be having the Kane County Farmland Conservation Program presentation, and I think that's going to be a very important one when we start talking about what are we going to do with our farmland. They already have a program. If it is to our liking, we don't have to reinvent the wheel to do something, but we can build on something else that appears to be successful at this time. In the meantime, if there is any public comment,
That means us.
well, are you the speaking public or are you speaking as a soil and water person?
Soil and water. Oh,
Okay,
I thought
hold
you were
on
ready
just a
for us.
second. Okay, since there is none and there is no old business, let's go ahead and have Soil and Water Conservation District. We're a little loose here, it's okay. Can we get you another chair for over there, or do you want to?
I'll stand, that's all right. I'm used to
Some
that.
people are doing it. We have Spring Duffy and Critch.
Rachel Judd.
Okay.
She does her time.
Hi, good evening. Very pleased to be able to come here tonight and give you a little insight as to what the Soil and Water Conservation District does and how we work with the communities and the citizens of our counties. I'm Critchell Judd. I'm the chairman of the board. This is Spring Duffy. She's our executive director. And we also have back in the back there, Dean Farr, who's one of our directors, elected directors. So healthy soils and clean water is what we strive for. That's our basic bottom line in order to help the citizens of the counties live both healthily and productively. Our district was formed in 1947 under a 1937 state statute to protect the natural resources. This came out of the Dust Bowl, excuse me, out of the Dust Bowl times. The state passed a statute that created soil and water districts, and McHenry counties created theirs in 1947. And then in 2011, we merged with Lake County. So that's why we are the McHenry Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District. So you can see on this, up here on the screen, our vision statement is protecting and enhancing our natural resources. And mission is we provide leadership, education, service for the stewardship and conservation of the county's natural resources. Like I said, we were formed by a state statute. If you want to go to the next slide, there we go. We have 5 elected board members. We have 2 that are elected 1 year, then we all serve 2-year terms. 2 are elected 1 year and 3 the next. We hold our own elections. That's the way the state has it set up. We talked about getting into the general elections, but the cost would be sky high, and it's not set up in the statute. So if you want to vote for Soil and Water Soil and Water Conservation District directors, you have to come to our office on, usually it's the third Thursday in February.
Usually.
We publish it in the papers and nobody shows up. But we still have good people on the board. So we have 5 board members. Between the 5 of us, we have over 50 years of experience with Soil and Water Conservation District. We've got a couple of farmers, we've got some people with some technical background in working with soils, and it's a good group. We have 3 associate members who we appoint, and they have over 60 years of experience with the Soil and Water District. And then we have 4 staff. Spring is one of our staff. We've got 3 others that have multiple certifications as to their education and knowledge, and they're very dedicated people, and between the 4 of them, there's about 65 years of experience. So we're not any Johnny-come-lately, we've been here for a long time. We work out of a shared office behind Rosati's Pizza with 3 government agencies, Farm Service Agency, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the Illinois Department of Ag. So all of us are housed in that. We work with clients from NRCS and SWC and FSA to help them access the programs and that those agencies have. We also help with answering phones and some paperwork. The other thing that we have is we own an 8-acre piece of property on the corner, the southeast corner of Dean Street and Route 14. We're hidden back in the trees there, and we bought that about almost 25 years ago. But we've got an auxiliary building there that's used for storage for our stuff, but it's also used for the community uses it. We have Land Conservancy uses it occasionally for things. The defenders, the environmental defenders use it. We've got a couple of Boy Scout troops that come out and use it, one on a regular basis. And it's open to the community, set it up ahead of time if they want to use the parking lot and use the building. We're very proud of that. We have field days, do educational programs out there. It's a real valuable asset that we've got. Okay, our funding. I guess that's the next one, or maybe we still have this one. Anyway, our fund. Okay. Talk about our funding. Our funding comes from a number of sources. One is the McHenry County Board gives us a grant every year because of the service that we give to the community and the citizens. We partner with Planning and Development for Wetland Services. We've got an intergovernmental agreement with them, and so we've been working on that for how many years? 10 or 11, yeah, that's right. We also get grants from the state of Illinois through the Department of Ag, but a majority of our income comes from our the fees that we are allowed to charge for doing things for the community, such as natural resource inventory reports that are done for zoning changes. We do soil borings and septic suitability. We do erosion and sediment control inspections for a number of different agencies. So that's where our funding comes from. Programming that we do, like I say, the NRIs that are done for zoning, there's always half a dozen to a dozen of those every month that Spring has to get out or Ryan has to get out. We do soil borings for basement and septic suitability, soil surveys. We do erosion and sediment control inspections and plan reviews. So anytime something's built, you see the piles of dirt with the fencing around, the silt fencing around them. our people go out on a regular basis and make sure that that fencing is in good shape and that the soil is being managed correctly for whatever's going on that site. We also do wetland reviews for the county. We do individual resource planning for homeowners. A lot of educational outreach through the schools in the county and through the Envirothon, which is a state competition. We also administer state cost share programs for cover crops and other things. We do a fish sale and do tree sales every year. And then we also do CSP planning for people, for homeowners, with homeowners on that. So I'll turn it over to Spring to get into a little bit more detail on some of them.
Yeah, so I'm just
She's
going-
the expert.
I'm just going to go into a couple of those categories that Critch mentioned. One is our education programming and our outreach that we do. We do K through 12 programming in classrooms. A lot of that focuses around soil erosion demonstrations, teaching them the best management practices to prevent the soil erosion. We also do a lot of watershed demonstrations on non-point and point source pollution, and then also just general soil classes basically with kids. So they're getting to feel the soil, feel the texture of it, look at the different colors that the soil can come in, the structure, how it breaks apart, that type of thing. So we're teaching the kids those types of things and why it's important. Okay, why do you care if you have a hydric soil that's wet all the time? Okay, as you grow older, you do not want to build your house in that type of soil. So we do a lot of those types of programs in schools. We also are partner with the Youth Groundwater Festival with the county with the McSeep program, so the McHenry County Schools Environmental Education Program. And we're actually the host of that. So it happens out at our Dean Street facility. And so, we're in charge of making sure the site's all ready for that. And then we also have our staff out there doing a bunch of the stations for it. And you can see this little gentleman in the corner, that was this I think it was May when we had our last one. He has the dip net and he's looking for invertebrates out there and counting them. And as far as our staff's concerned, we have our soil scientist out there. He will do a soil boring with the kids. Again, having them touch and feel the soil and talk about the importance and how the groundwater and water actually percolates through the soil. And then myself and my coworker Ryan will actually do kind of a non-point source pollution demonstration with them in our parking lot. So we'll take dye test strips and place them in our parking lot, and then we have the kids dump a big huge rain barrel over it that hits the dye strips, and then we walk them through our treatment that we have on our property to treat that pollution before it actually ends up in the headwaters of the Kish. So it's a fun demonstration where we take them through and they like seeing that green slimy looking water heading through the parking lot. As Critch mentioned, we also do the Envirothon competition. We are at the beginning of that Envirothon competition. So it's a high school competition where 5-member teams compete in the areas of water, soils, aquatics, forestry, and then a 5th category which changes each year. This year's topic was adapting to a changing climate. And so we are part of the Northeastern Illinois Envirothon, so we help put that competition on. Our winner goes down to the state competition, and then the state winner actually goes on to the international competition. So this year, we actually had a Lake County school of ours win. Adelaide Stevenson went down to state for us, and as of this weekend, they'll be headed to New Brunswick to compete in the international competition. So they won state, and they're headed up there. So they're going to be competing for a bunch of scholarships. So all next week they'll be competing. So hopefully, I believe they find out, I think it's Friday night, the end results, the final results. So hopefully we'll hear something by the end of next week on how they did. We also do FFA soil judging. So we, again, at our Dean Street facility, we use that a lot, but we actually dig soil pits for the kids to come in, and they'll actually, those high schools will compete and judge those soils in there. And then it's every 3 to 4 years, it's actually at our site. Otherwise, it floats to a different county, and our soil scientist helps those other counties judge pits before the competition as well. We also provide a lot of adult education. We do contractor workshops for especially erosion and sediment control, making sure those contractors know the different best management practices out there to keep that soil on site. We partner with the Land Conservancy doing lady landowner workshops, which I find very, very fulfilling myself, talking to these women about different conservation practices out there. And then we have various producer workshops, such as cover crop workshops, soil health workshops, etc. And I saw that Janice was on the on the screen. She helped me with one of our workshops that we had on cover crops last year. So it's great partnerships we have all around. So if you want to go to the next screen there, Renee. We also have one of those programs that Rich mentioned was also cost share. So this is a lot of the bulk of the work that we do. We have our Partners for Conservation program. This is through the state of Illinois. We're an administrator for McHenry and Lake County. We receive money from the state, and we have applicants that we will provide up to 75% cost share if they meet the requirements. And we typically the cost share comes in the form of cover crop funding, converting from a conventional system to a no-till or strip-till system, pollinator planting, like the picture in the corner where we've got the fritillary butterfly and the wild bergamot flower there. Well sealing as well, so for those abandoned wells, we'll seal them to make sure that the pollution's not getting through those wells and right down to the groundwater. And then also rain gardens, so we can provide funding for that. There also is a state stream bank stabilization program. Unfortunately, it's very poorly funded. There's only $100,000 for the whole state, so that money gets gobbled up pretty fast. But we have funded a few projects throughout the county, especially in our municipalities like Algonquin, Lake in the Hills. We've done a few projects with them, and then a few in Lake County as well. A newer program that the state has is Fall Covers for Spring Savings. So it provides a rebate to farmers who put in cover crops, and they get a rebate on their insurance premiums. And so we help those farmers get all the paperwork needed to apply for this, because this is a first come, first serve. So when that program opens, those acres go very fast. Usually in one day they're already allocated. So we make sure that they're ready to go so they can jump right on the computer and get their information out there and apply for that. And then the state will have us go and verify those different acres that they have accepted. So we make sure that those cover crops are actually planted. Then because we are in a federal building, we do help with federal cost share and answering questions with that. So such as you might have heard of the Conservation Reserve Program. That's where they set aside acres, so they'll put it to prairie or tree plantings. They'll set that land aside and start farming it. Also the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, which helps fund a lot of different conservation practices, like, again, cover crops, no-till, waterways, etc. And then there's the Conservation Stewardship Program, which rewards farmers for the good work that they do, and if they implement additional conservation practices, they receive more funding from the state. So we do a lot of partnerships that way. We will go out to a site together and evaluate and see which programs are most beneficial to that producer, so that whether it's through the state or through the federal programs. So we do a lot of evaluations of producers that way. So that's mainly kind of the nutshell of what we provide. But we do a lot of other planning. We have lots of resources that could be available if you're interested in your planning documents. We have resources on the agricultural areas in the county. We've helped with the creating of the SARA maps that are there and some other stuff that we've done. We have tons of soil information. We've created all sorts of layers throughout the years on that as well. So if you're looking for any additional information, probably can track it down. So,
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
And with those the soils competitions or the soils identifications that they do?
yeah.
Now, do the students actually identify soils such as Caitlin or Drummer or whatever, or it happens to be, or are you just looking at?
They're
This is
looking at it.
a
They're
hybrid
looking at where
soil.
the horizon ends. They're looking at the texture of that soil. They're doing the colors. They're determining if it's a well-drained soil, somewhat poorly drained soil. They're doing all that kind of evaluation to determine. They're not really necessarily coming out with the name of the soil type, but they're basically coming out with those properties of that soil.
I was just curious, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a good program.
It is a very good program. No matter if you're in farming or whatever you're doing, knowing soils and what's below your feet is very important.
It is. I think that's really good.
Harry?
Do you assist in our mining industry in the county?
We do natural resource information reports for them, and we do erosion and control inspections. But other than that, not really. They're really regulated more by the EPA than by us.
Okay.
And like the
And
programs that we
then
do.
the beginning or the advent of community farming, the communities having plots for people to farm. Do you assist on that?
We're getting more into that. They're
Yeah.
actually open, NRCS opened or is in the process of opening a Chicago urban office now. So
Okay.
they're finally getting back into that, so it's kind of coming around and more funding is becoming available to assist with those types of things.
Because I think that's really important
Yes,
too.
I do too, and creating high tunnels and different things
Yes.
for those areas, for those farmers that are on those small little acreages or just
Mhm.
community type based farms, yeah.
And then what about the city and municipality farming? That they have plots that people can get a 6x6 plot to farm?
We'd be happy to help, and
Because
they.
I think
yeah.
that's the future too.
Yep, yep. And a lot of them, they're getting to where they can qualify for some of these programs. There are some, when it comes to municipalities and kind of government agencies, there are a little more restrictions on those types of entities receiving funding.
Mhm.
But your smaller homeowner and stuff, having an acre and wanting to do an urban farm, there is definitely funding
They
available
call it
for
a
that.
homestead now or something
Yes,
like that.
yes, there's
Yeah.
definitely funding, as long as they are making a profit off of that.
You got
It
it.
has to be a profit coming off of it.
Michelle?
So what do you anticipate being the biggest issues in soil and water conservation going into 2050?
Honestly, I think some of the farming practices, I worry, to be honest. The loss of soil health, the productivity of the soil, with, some of the industrial farming that's occurred, and just the infiltration of water because of kind of the way the soil's been treated through the years on some properties. It causes crusting and other things on the soil, and so when it rains, it's not allowing that water to percolate, so we're seeing a lot more runoff and that type of thing. So I think soil health is a huge issue, and actually that's a huge focus of a lot of the federal programs right now is soil health. Ensuring that we get those microbes and everything back in there working the way they're supposed to, how a soil is supposed to work, make it alive again, so that all the functionalities of the rain and everything kind of works together
rain?
again.
We don't have rain.
Yeah, we don't get rain. I don't have rain at my house. I know that. I haven't had much for 2
Another
months.
thing that concerns us is all of the building and paving that goes on in our county. And, you look at the two sides of the county, take 47 as the dividing line. And, it's night and day as to how much hard surface there is. And that's something that we're concerned about because it really, hard surfaces promote runoff and overtax the systems. One of the things we did when we built our building out at Dean Street, we call it, we put in a couple of a leaky berm at the end of the parking lot so that the water, instead of just a pond, the water would go there and then gradually leak out and go into the wetlands there.
We have a depressed island there too,
Yeah.
so it goes into the depressed island and it makes its way to the detention
Right, so-
basin through the leaky berm, through a wetland complex before it actually gets to the.
Because we're situated right at the headwaters of the Kishwauk there. So that's another one of our concerns
Do
when
you
we
have
do
a,
these
do you have a
NRIs.
monitor of runoff? Do you have any type of statistical information on that?
No,
No.
we do not.
There's a deeper well
Yeah, we have
there,
a groundwater monitoring wells.
groundwater
that-
monitoring well there that the state put in,
Okay.
but it's.
Because a lot of municipalities now are creating ordinances to prevent runoff.
Right.
Whatever that means, okay? Or who's liable for that. I was wondering if you're involved in that type of work of monitoring that.
Not monitoring, no.
No, not monitoring.
Just, the only work would be when they're implementing these types of practices, just making sure that construction phase is not, and there's not runoff coming off of it during that construction phase. Those
Does the
types of
county have an
systems.
ordinance on runoff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Randy?
How often do you guys get involved with the developers?
All the time.
You do?
We have one staff person directly, that's all he does is urban erosion control and working with developers. Yeah, going out to construction sites, walking through their sites, making sure that the sediment's not leaving the site and walking with that construction worker company and showing them where things need to be fixed and how to fix it. and
Is
different
it
options.
typically the excavation guys, or who is it? Is it the GC, or?
It depends. A lot of times it's the excavation guys because the other people aren't there.
Sure. Well,
Yep.
they're the first on the
Yep.
job, so.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, I have a question. We have the fall cover crops for spring
Safe.
Savings.
thing. How many people do you work with to apply for that? And how many people can we handle?
So we probably, out of that, we probably only get
5 or
7 or
6?
8 that will apply. They'll do
Okay.
there's no acreage cap on what they can put in.
Okay.
So we have people that, they'll put in all of their acres because they put in cover crops in all their acres. But there's only so many acres for the whole state, and that's where the problem comes. There's only, I believe it's like 170,000 acres for the whole
Okay.
state. So once those acres are gone, no one else can get in.
Right.
And then the other thing is that there's a lot of producers that are putting in cover crops, but they do not report that to the Farm Service Agency. They don't want the government knowing what they're doing. So they need a form from the Farm Service Agency to apply for this program. So if they don't report and get that form, they can't apply.
So they can do it, but it's
Yeah.
on them.
Exactly.
Right,
And
yeah.
there's a lot of them that do, especially, actually, and it's nice, it's actually in our western part of the county, there are a lot of cover crops over there in the area where you think that they really don't need it as much because it's not, the rolling ground that we see where it would hold that soil more over the winter and stuff. They're doing it a lot in that flat, nice black over there on the other side of like 23, Highway 23 to the west over there. There's a lot of cover crops over there.
So it's available and the farmers are getting more used to doing that kind of thing as
Mhm.
opposed to,
Absolutely, absolutely.
because I know for a while there, and I've seen it, is the buffer that has always been the easement between the road and where they actually work their crops, where there have been trees and things that they've cut down and took out so that they can get more acreage in under cultivation.
And part of it too is the equipment size has changed so much, so it makes it, without having the trees there, it makes it easier for them to turn and other things with a lot of these,
Okay.
their big equipment.
Does that affect the runoff?
It can affect wind erosion,
Okay,
and then also trees tend to make a little microclimate, so it actually kind of keeps their fields a little cooler and a little wetter, so during these drought periods,
Okay.
kind of those trees kind of help. They actually can be a hindrance though too, because they create shade as well coming into the field, so there is that area, if you've ever looked at a cornfield that has a tree line right there, you'll see how the corn's really short and then it goes up higher as further you go into the field. That's that shadow coming off the trees, and also those trees it's sucking the
They're
water
sucking
too.
moisture, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and taking the nutrients up. So there's some negative effects too, and that's what the farmers see as well. So it's a hard
That's
one.
okay. I
Yeah,
just-
it's a hard one.
if that is the way to if that's the way to go to increase the microbes in the soil, then I'm happy to hear that there are more and more people doing
Yeah.
it, and whatever else they're doing that looks like they're kind of, I don't know what the word is. Well, yes, I do know what the word is, but I can't use it here. Never mind. Michelle?
So, one of our big roles is to produce a future land use map. And I want to know, what do you think the most important factors for us to consider in creating that map are?
One would be aware of possible urban ag conflicts. Just making sure that the farmers are able to drive their equipment down the road without getting killed, which has happened in this county. And also, just the fact of a subdivision on a farmer dumping in their tiles, hooking up to their tiles and just runoff coming onto the field. Also, with a lot of urban development come the people that think that, that farmer's field is just access for them, it's just free reign for them to drive on or whatever and utilize. And there's crops get destroyed that way as well.
Yes.
And it's their business. So it's someone destroying their business, and you just keep cognizant of that type of thing. don't know. I mean, we are seeing a lot, I know you guys can't really do anything about it right now, but solar farms and prime farmland. Our flat, black, perfect soil for growing crops is getting gobbled up by solar farms.
Because it's easy for them to
It's
put it
easy.
in there. It's easier for them to put a solar farm on a flat black piece of ground as opposed to a hilly piece of ground that might have some gravelly soils, which is a better place for them from an agricultural standpoint.
But in a way, farmer doesn't have to sell or lease his property for them.
But he can make more money.
He
So-
can-
And I do understand that, and so then the next question might be is how do we incentivize farmers to not do
Well,
that?
Our funding is really limited that we get from the state for a lot of our conservation programs. I don't know if there's a way to open up any county funding, to
Well, I
implement
don't know,
conservation
and
programs,
there's
something like
always
that.
money someplace,
Mhm,
but we
yeah.
just need to know from where to get it,
Mhm.
to be able to do something.
Yeah.
But farmers, they care about their land. They also
Absolutely,
care about
absolutely.
their heritage and that, so it's a tough decision to make.
But supporting them and, providing that funding and the opportunity and, we try to provide as much training and assistance that way to help because it's all a learning curve. You're
Oh,
used
sure.
to farming one way and then all of a sudden you're adopting something else that you're not used to.
Years and years and
And
years.
it takes a lot of
Randy?
effort and work.
With relationship to the solar farms, have you done any studies in relationship to what kind of cause and effect the solar farms will have on regards to the soil, and not only the soil, but the moisture inside the soil?
I haven't really seen any studies that way. The Department of Ag does require an ag impact mitigation agreement with all the solar farms. So they have, that states, that any wire that's within the top, 3 feet, I think it is, Renee, they have to remove that at the end of the life of the panels, and it talks about the remediation of all that kind of stuff. So there is agreements that way, but I haven't seen any studies on the water. The one thing that is nice is, the county and the state are requiring some native plantings in there, so those are deep-rooted grasses, so that's gonna allow for more infiltration in those areas, as opposed to a corn crop or soybean. This roots just go farther, so it's gonna create all those little channels going down, so that does help.
What about wind farming?
I don't know enough about wind farming, to be honest. Yeah,
We
the only
have
town where I know is the one in Woodstock here.
We've
It's
been told
hated, I can
that
tell you
we
that.
are in the wind zone, that no one is interested in wind for McHenry County.
So we can blow away that idea, is that?
That's
right.
There you go. Got that one all there.
Real quick.
That was a good one.
Is that one on the south side of town, the only one in the county, I think?
That's the only one I'm aware of, the
I
one
think
that's
so.
owned by a private individual, right?
Yeah.
The company up here,
Well, and we have some farmers have
the small
turbines.
The
ones.
small ones,
But
yes.
the wind farm, I guess our wind isn't the quality they're looking for, I don't know.
And I would know, a wind farm is gonna have less impact on the soil.
They have access roads and stuff like that.
Access roads, but less ground is taken up by each tower.
I'm thinking of the erosion factor of it, the wind erosion factor. Topsoil erosion.
I think it's more dependent on what the farmer's doing with his land than
Yeah.
having a farm, a turbine up there.
Well, I was just gonna say, if you wanted to know how bad things are, the Lee County farmers are happy to tell you what a mess it is with the wind turbines. The deaths of birds and oil mess and the light flickers and the noise, and then they break down and nobody knows how to fix them. And it's just like a lot of different things. And there's an enormous amount of maintenance that goes into them too. And that has not ever been fully addressed. But I can tell you that, Lee County farmers really are familiar with the situation and hate it, just hate it.
Okay then.
Do you want to see if Nancy has anything?
I'm sorry. I'm looking down at you, Nancy. Do you have any questions or any comments? She's on mute.
No, but I'm liking listening.
Okay, well, that's
Thank
important.
you.
You're welcome.
Carolyn.
So I do have a question.
Carolyn.
So if we're trying to get to a point where we don't have to rely on fossil fuels, because there is a lot of pushback on solar. And I have heard that in terms of wind, we are not suitable, which is good, because I really like them anyway. And I don't even know why. I think because they're big and you know, the birds and everything else, and I don't know how you manage that. I don't know enough about it, so that's probably not a great statement to make. But I am concerned because, I mean, we talk about losing prime farmland, and we're putting these solar panels on and that sort of thing. Well, we've lost prime farmland, and we don't have solar panels. They're not because of solar panels. It's because as we go out from our municipalities, we keep grabbing it, and we grab it, and we grab it, and we grab it. And so, to say that solar, just simply because it's going onto prime farmland, is bad, in the end, if you have a solar farm on prime farmland, in 30 years it's can be prime farmland again, and in fact it will probably be healthier after 25 years of pollinator plants. That's my understanding.
Yeah, except for where the posts were. You know, anywhere there's infrastructure will be degraded, but
Right, but that
anywhere else, yeah.
Right,
Yep.
right,
Yep.
and so, I mean,
Agree with
and
that.
like anything that would have to take time to commend where the pylons were, or whatever they're
Yep.
called. I guess I'm not sure where I'm going with this, except the fact that it's, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because we need both.
Right.
And, I'm sorry.
I'll let you finish.
No, I'm not even sure where I'm going with it. I mean, I think, first of all, I think that going into talking about that, because I think solar could be its own kind of, and I know it came up last year, but I mean, in terms of how we're trying to deal with it, there might be some more exploring that we need to do as a committee about our commission, about where we want to go as a county, because there's a lot of different opinions out here about what we do with solar, or how we even manage our energy needs going forward, because there are so many problems we're going to start facing very, very quickly, because we're not slowing down the use of fossil fuels. So, but that can be kind of a separate thing, but then just in terms of the impact here, and then it gets back to how do we then protect that farmland? And I asked that question, I mean, are there things like putting into agricultural districts or something?
Yeah, so you can do agricultural districts. I'm not sure, the ag areas that we have, that was more for noise and smell. A lot of those ag areas were to protect the farmers against complaints from development moving in and then complaining about their operation. So that's what those are for. It's basically
That's what-
saying, I'm farming, that's what I'm doing. It comes with smells, it comes with sounds, it comes with all that stuff. So that's what the kind of the purpose of those were. So I'm not
Okay.
sure how that fits in with solar. As far as prime farmland and saving prime farmland, there is a new program that was just out. They just announced it about, a couple weeks ago or last week? I can't remember, Dean, if he's looking at me. The new ACEP program, so Agricultural Conservation Easement Program through the federal government. It just came out. It's going to be going on for, is it 10 more years or, I can't remember.
Say again?
How many years will the ACEP program be available? Do you remember in the
This-
reading?
All these new federal farm conservation program dollars under the Inflation Reduction Act are good through September 2031. So we're gonna have about 7 more years to take a shot at this stuff.
So that does provide money towards agricultural easements.
And we'll see how that ties in with Janice and Kane County's ag
Yep,
program, and
yep.
she can tell us more
Yep.
about that part.
Yep.
See how that all works. But
She's
see,
very
we're already
knowledgeable.
thinking
She's
out to
listening.
2031. How did that happen? Anyone else? I want to thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for allowing us the
inviting us.
opportunity.
I had seen you with your presentation at the Committee of the Whole on, what was it? It was early.
About a month ago.
Yeah, about a month ago. And we've been talking about it since then and how we were going to start doing these presentations, but we've had other things that we had to work on before that. Now we can just get into the nitty-gritty, sit down, listen, and question. So thank you very much again for coming tonight.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And if any other questions come up, we left everybody with a kind of a synopsis sheet that's got both Spring and my contact date on it. So feel free to give us a call, let us know if there's anything else that we can do for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just getting her presentation ready.
I see her.
Here she is.
I think we need to tell her that we're ready for her, right?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I was just waiting, there you go. Janice, hello. Nice to have
Hello,
you.
everyone.
So I don't know if you were on for this last 45 minutes,
She was.
so I'm sure.
Yes, I have that.
And
Yes, it was good to see you. Great. We have it.
so I guess it's,
Need to turn up the volume. Can you guys hear?
sure, can you folks hear her?
No.
Okay.
No,
A little louder would be good.
yeah, it's breaking up.
Would you like me to talk loud, or what is, no, I know it's a little, I just hear a little static there.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but we're adjusting the volume in the room so we can hear you better.
Okay, great.
Okay, let's give it a go.
Should we try it?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
I will get your presentation out.
Okay, if it turns out, oh, we're getting feedback. I wonder if I should call it.
I don't know.
What do you think, Renee? How do
I don't know.
Yeah, your voice,
maybe I'll try.
Maybe can we mute ourselves while she's, or is that not,
Oh, sure, yeah.
while she's presenting?
Yes, let's see if that helps.
we're going to turn this over to you and we're going to silence ourselves until the end for questions. Not a bad idea.
Is, well,
You'll probably
unmuted,
have
so,
to text or,
yeah.
Should I tell them, how is that working?
Sounds good.
she can hear us.
Oh, now we have it in chat too. We are muted, sounds good. Thank you. And
I don't know why I'm muted.
You're not. You shouldn't be.
Do we have to stay, do we have to stay muted?
She's not muted, but we are. So-
This is Nancy. I'm also on my phone, and I can't hear them at all right now, but maybe they'll come back. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if I should call like you're doing, which I can try that.
Let's unmute this.
But okay, yeah, let's.
Okay,
That doesn't
I had us muted,
Okay.
so we can hear you fine, but we can hear you fine now.
Oh, okay. So now you can hear me well. Okay. I'm going to start then. I'll for you to mute and then I'll go.
Okay, we're gonna mute and then just get started, and I'll do your slides for you.
Okay, super. Okay, and then I'll just tell you when I need the slides moved. All right, hello everyone, good evening. My name is Janice Hill, and I manage King County's Fireland Protection Program. I've been a land use planner for almost 40 years, which is crazy for me to say that. And I've been managing King County's program for 23 years, since the inception of it. So, but I certainly have been to McHenry County before to present. I believe it was to one of your farmland protection groups that was looking at that maybe through the lens of local food. It's been many years. and then also certainly the Farm Bureau to talk, and we've been good partners and neighbors between Kane and McHenry for a long time. So I'm really happy to have been invited. This is a conversation that has to take place over more than one time. So if we'll do a general overview of our program in Kane County and how it can compare to other county programs. And then if you have further questions beyond what we can do tonight at the end, then I'm happy to respond or come back or whatever you would like, because it's kind of a big topic. I'm going to approach this from the standpoint of not only what we did in Kane, but what I think is why I like county-based programs. So that you can look at it through that lens. There's lots of ways to do farmland protection. Because I'm a planner and I serve plan commissions and have over the years, I always look at farmland protection as an implementation of our comprehensive plan. That's how we've set it up in Kane County, and it's the responsibilities of the program have grown and changed over the years, but really when we get right down to it, the plan is first and foremost, and we are, as you've mentioned earlier in conversations, we're managing that, especially as planners, we're managing that balance between growth and development and what should be protected, and how it should be protected, and when it should be protected, given all those things. And certainly when it comes to the top, soil quality, protection of soil, and water resources are our number one goal in this whole thing. And when you look at you mentioned about the federal programs, and I'll talk about that a bit, but that's, we always have to look at it through that lens. It's not, for us, it's not an issue of using easements and other zoning strategies, things like that, to kind of interfere with development. What we want is development to happen in the best way for everyone. And a lot of what that means is finding endpoints for communities of where they would be, as far as the line of this, as far as they're going to go, and not develop beyond that, and having a distinction between where utility extensions end and where agriculture will continue. Now, it's not that cut and dry with just like a line right down the county calling, just saying on this side of the line is development and this side. It's not quite that easy, but there is something to be said about having some actual boundaries and lines. And we do have what's called a conceptual land use strategy in Kane that does show that our growth areas and redevelopment areas versus our agriculture areas. And we defend that through three things. First, the comprehensive plan that's appeared in 3 comprehensive plans now over time to be very clear about where those boundaries are. And that doesn't mean that we haven't had developers propose and challenge things, but I will say our county boards and our plan commissions in recommending to the county boards have been very consistent about that line. Now they might adjust it over time, but they've been very firm, because what we have looked at is our neighbor to the east, which is DuPage County, and we don't want to develop that way. I mean, certainly if we were to let that line go, we would have development edge to edge, corner to corner, and look like DuPage during those times of, rapid growth and development. So this tool for farmland protection I'm going to talk about is through that lens of having a comprehensive plan. We are members of CMAP 2, which also shows all the reasons to protect the land. And we have all, the same partners, so Water District, Farm Bureau, all understanding the importance of this. So from that point, we jump off into our program. So now you can go to my next slide. Tonight I'm going to talk mostly about the tool of the agriculture conservation easement, which is what most people are curious about. But like I said, this is not for every property, and it does go hand in hand. It has to have the backdrop of the comprehensive plan, the zoning, subdivision ordinance, the resources for farmers to keep them viable, all the programming you talked about earlier, all of that has to be there, which you have. But, you know, to get down to this actual easement process, this is what we've created. So we started to study this. In fact, I found documents that went back to the 1970s that called for using agriculture conservation easements as a tool. They were early used during that era, which was when I was in high school, just to put some perspective on it. This was used in Pennsylvania, primarily Lancaster County, which is Amish country. That area, they were definitely starting to use the easement. And so then they were used, you know, other New York State and also on the West Coast a little bit, but not really used much in the Midwest until relatively recently, since 2000. I have to state from the top, this is a voluntary program. This is not something that is ever imposed on anyone. This is the landowner approaching the county or a land trust, because you certainly have at least one land trust, maybe two, working in McHenry County using this tool of ag easements. And we are in partnership with Regional Conservation Project, where we use federal money. And I know some of the land trusts are working on land protection for farm land protection using that funding. So anyway, but when it comes to like the county program, well, in any case, whether it's a land trust or a county or even a municipality, there are some, this is always voluntary. And the easement value, so you have the two bar charts. This is not true value at this point, but just to give you an idea, you know, you have your overall value per acre. And if you were to break that out, and when the appraisers look at that and dig a little deeper and do a certain type of appraisal, especially for farms like ours, where we're at the edge of a major metropolitan area, you have a value that's above its agriculture value. That value is the development value. And both values can fluctuate. We know that right now ag value continues to rise, but sometimes that easement value, those development rights, that will ebb and flow depending on the market value. When we started our program and researching in 1999, if you think back on that time, there was so much speculation, so much sprawling suburban development, and it was increasing that easement value over time and putting pressure on our ag land so much that farmers could not afford to compete with developers. And so what happens in this case, we were able to offer to landowners to approach us and say they will sell us that development right, the portion in orange. We extinguish it, no longer exists after the transaction, and then we keep the agriculture right, exactly, and then we keep the blue land value, which is its ag value, stays as an ag value in perpetuity. There are very, very, very few things in life that are in perpetuity, but this is one. It stays there, and now it stays it's on the tax rolls, still privately owned, can be sold if the landowner decides to do that, but it stays in its ag value, and the easement document itself states that, says that it has to stay in farming and that the county will defend that. Okay, go to the next one. So here's the map. It's kind of an older map because I pulled this from a different presentation, but you can see our county. In the green are our forest preserve districts. I know you have a conservation district format, but we have forest preserve districts, and those are permanently protected land for natural areas. Some of them are still farmed, but the idea is that those will be permanent public spaces managed through our forest preserve district. But you look over in those western townships, and the other farms are shown in the brown and the different colors. Those are farms that have been permanently protected and have approached us, and then over the last, since we've had the program and started in 2001, all the way through now, they have a permanent easement on them. And then the ones in the different colors are kind of either going through the process, either an application that we have that we're reviewing or waiting for funding, and then we go from there. So when we started the program, and this is kind of, I know you were getting to that federal funding, when we started the program, we created the program without, and we did not mention what type of funding we were going to use, just that the county could raise money for farmland protection to do these easements. And that easements could be either donated, which we do have some in that area that's shown in brown that are donated, not so many, because most people do have all of their all of their equity and investment tied up in their land often, but sometimes you will find a landowner that really wants to donate, not the farm, but donate the development rights to protect that. So we do have a couple of those, and they did that as part of their estate. The rest of them were purchased outright at that appraised value that I talked about. The other option is to kind of do a hybrid where the landowner is donating some of that value, and then we are purchasing some of that value. There's some tax benefits to that. We haven't done that much, but we're hopefully looking to do that a little bit more. When I say tax benefits, that's to the landowner. So you can see, well, I can tell you exactly what happened. The story I always tell it is the ordinance gets approved. Well, and I can tell you how we created the ordinance later, but once the ordinance is approved and the funding was set there, we actually had a farmer that was kind of walked us through with us as we went through setting up the ordinance, and they said, we'll be the first one to do it. And so they were, and we did the first transaction. We used our own money in Kane County, and we closed, and then my phone rang off the hook by the time they got home. Because once the check was real and everybody knew it and it went through, my phone was ringing. And I didn't have marketing material for the longest time. I still don't have much marketing material because you can see how these farms, you can't really see the lines between these farms, but they're clustered, right? And that's because often these are families that are related, which I'm sure you have that circumstance in parts of your area. And if they're not related, they're good neighbors with each other, and the trust is there, and once one farm starts to do it, then the next people are curious about it. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody comes through at once, which is a good thing because you never have enough money to do everything all at once. And nor is that the goal. When I talk to families, we talk very extensively about why they might want to do this, and if they want to do it, and if this is something that works with the entire family. And making, having everybody look really long-term and even do some succession planning to show that they have an idea of what's going to happen. As you know, there are a few instances that are pretty common, and also this is pretty common across the country. You have some people that are coming in at the very end of life, and they need peace of mind, and they want the land protected for that purpose. It's for their family heritage, and they felt that potential development, and that's not something that they want. We often have a lot of heritage farms here. The other instance is kind of like that, but then it's another version that is, and often women owners too, and Spring mentioned the lady landowners. There are quite a few lady landowners that have someone farming, often a neighbor, sometimes a relative, that is now farming for them, and they're ready to retire. They would like to maybe go someplace warm, so they would like to cash out and be done with this, but they, need that investment money back from the farm. So turns out the transaction, because it lowers the purchase value for the next farmer, and this ends up being really great for that, transferring the land from one person to the next, whether it's one generation within the family or a neighbor. We look at that as true success because we have family farms, family businesses, and we like to keep it keep it that way as opposed to outside investors coming in. So our first goal is to do that. Now, that was unintended consequence, pleasant consequence. It's not like we designed the program to do that, but for sure we know that the landowners and the farmers are aging, and then I also have the next generation contacting me saying, my aunt and uncle own this farm, they're going, they're thinking about the future, and I'm the only one left, and I want a farm. How do we go about doing it? That's not uncommon either, here and everywhere else. So anyway, those are the types of situations where people come to us. We do an application, we look at our funding, what we have for match, and then we go forth. And in the first year, that's what we did. We had a certain amount of money. Now, I know we used our gaming revenue from the riverboat, and no one else has quite that bucket of money. And now we don't even have that same bucket of money by any means that we had many years ago. People gamble in all kinds of ways now, so the money that we had back then is not the same as we have now. But so someone from the federal government said, you should really look at our program with NRCS, and actually it wasn't called ASAP-AL at that time, it was the FRPP. So we've been in the program over 4 farm bills, and the Farmland Protection Program has changed names every time, but it's pretty much the same. And so we started to tap into that money in the second year, and for many of the farms we do that. There are occasions that we don't. We just use our own money, or we'll take the donation and we don't need the federal program. But I bring this up because as a county, if you were to do this program, that would be one of the options that you would have. You don't have to take the money, and you don't have to have a transaction that uses federal money. If you have a farmer, landowner that, it turns out that's a great application and you want to do it, but they are, insistent that they don't want to deal with the federal government, then, you have that option. You can set your program up that way. I will say, though, that our board is extremely happy that we bring back that federal dollar and more and more and more of it, because it's the only program that they can think of that we bring that federal dollar back in that same level of reimbursement. Now, of course, you have public-private transportation funding and things like that, but certainly in this arena, that's the big benefit. But it is complex, and you need to have an expert work on it. It's dealing with the federal government is really a whole different world. Okay, next slide. So I have given this presentation to other counties, and one used this in Wisconsin when they asked me to speak. They were thinking about programs and things, and these were the benefits that I came up with. The reason why I like having the programs fit in local government, county government, and that does not mean that the land trust couldn't also do what they're doing too, and you can work together in that way. But these are the things that I think are really important. No group is better than the Plan Commission in reviewing and weighing in on alignment with planning and zoning, trends of development. There's no one better. And I've worked with Plan Commissions for 40 years, my favorite group, along with now my Farmland Protection Commission. But really and truly, you are the volunteers that know your place. The federal government is never going to know your area. That's not how they operate. But they're really in a different business there. So for making decisions about what should be protected and when and all those kinds of things, working with the Plan Commission is the best. What goes hand in hand with easements are the utility extensions, and that's kind of often overlooked, but controlling development with the municipalities, and we have that challenge where we can really only influence municipalities. The best way we can do that, I think, is looking at that advanced dollar that they're often trying to invest in utility extension to be able to attract developers, and then from that point, the race begins to gobble up the farmland, as opposed to encouraging more redevelopment and use of existing utilities and not just the spread of suburban sprawl. The land trusts don't do that. No one else is going to do that other than you and the county board. When it comes to research and development, it's the same thing. Just like tonight, you're doing your research, you're talking to partners. You're the best group to do that, and that's what we did in King County. All of the work and research to start our program, sat with our Plan Commission, and then we added some partners on, including Southern Water District, Farm Bureau, and some other experts in soil and water. And we went from there. The other point that I like too is, you start with one farm and then you look up 20 years later and all of a sudden you have 30 farms and you've got to track ownership and there's other things like that. And the county's parcel record keeping that, we used for tax purposes is a great way to keep track of your transactions and monitor those and kind of get a sense of everything that's going on around there. People will call and say, what's happening with that farm? Is it still, is it protected, whatever? And I feel like the county is the best place over time to keep that record because, as we know, people call the county all the time. Okay, next slide. And so again, kind of going back to the comprehensive plan, the different types of easements. One that I did not talk about is the agri-hood. Later, after we had the program for a long time, we were able to create a new plan classification, land use classification called Protected Ag Limited Development, and create an agri-hood, a category for an agri-hood to be developed. And it's Saracen Farm up in kind of Hampshire, Burlington area in our northwestern township. Hasn't taken off as maybe they would have hoped, but it has the main component along with the houses is it has portions that are permanently protected for farming and also equestrian uses. So, and we took that as a required donation for that, and the easement looks just like the rest of our easements. Except it was a required donation. There are spots where that may work for you, and you won't have to purchase any easement. Now, those are very specialized developments, and sometimes maybe as a transition between, where development's going to end and permanent agriculture is going to continue on the other side. Maybe that's a good transition. People are wanting to be closer to nature and closer to food growing than ever before, and so something to consider. Okay, next one. Okay, this was my tip before about how to not only put together an ordinance, but also review proposals that come from farmers. Our planning and development department was very much focused on development, especially, in the last years when development pressure was so high in the 80s, 90s. And really the staff review and planning commission meetings were very much only about a development proposal. But we're trying to flip that a little bit now, and I have to say some of that is because of changes with COVID, the cooling down of the race to develop, and that some of that was just from the mortgage crisis that we had, and it still is having that effect. Just changes in what people want. A lot of young couples don't want to be way out anymore in suburban development. So we took advantage of all those things, and now we have our staff review for ag proposals. And we might be looking at a lot of different things in there. We might be looking at all the topics you talked about earlier, runoff, all those different things, NRCS programs, but we also will talk about whether or not they're interested in an easement or not. That can happen, not every time, because how should I say this, every time we introduce the concept, people aren't usually at all like, okay, let's go for it. I mean, they have to go home, mull it over, talk to their family, come back a year later, 2 years later, sometimes 10 years later before they're ready to do this. But this is the way to get this conversation out there, but also solve some of the problems and challenges that are happening in an area where you have lots of things happening. Okay, next slide. So this is actually what it looks like when it's all said and done. And the program that we're in now is, remember the name has changed with each farm bill, but right now it's the ASAP, Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, and within that, the Agriculture Land Easement Program. So if you Google anything to NRCS, that's the program you're looking for. Now, when you talk about the new funding that's out there, which we have just contacted our Illinois NRCS office about, are, in addition to this traditional program, this program will stay, and right now we're the only county that applies for this money in Illinois, and we have been the only county that applies. So every year they come to us, NRCS Illinois, and say, how much do you want to protect this year? And then we work out how much, and then, because that depends on what match money we have, and then we go and who's applied and who's in the queue waiting and all those things, and then we work out an agreement for which farms are going through. But the new money, which is the Reduction Act money, that's above and beyond on top of this. The program will be slightly different in that will be similar in a lot of ways, but will be slightly different because they are going to focus very much on climate change and climate smart farms, and addressing the effect to protect farms, the effect of climate, the severe weather that we're having. We know that in the Midwest, our farms will experience climate change through drought and flooding. And so we can, and sometimes you have both at the same time, right, which is also kind of crazy. But with crop diversity too, and I don't know if you have much more crop diversity than we do, but we are local food farms already, experiencing the drought. They're talking about how can they get more water onto their property, and that's very expensive, meaning irrigation water. So we're having to get involved in those things and helping to offset the cost. There's money for those practices too. Spring talked about that. All of those practices, there's a whole list that come under the Climate Smart, under EQIP and CSP, that for the next years. But the way all of this happens, because we do not have a program in Illinois yet. There was a try for it in this last session. It didn't reach a conclusion. And hopefully someone will try again. But there is no one from Illinois out there representing all of us to NRCS saying we want more money. When you have other states out there, state governments doing this on everyone's behalf, then what happens? They get more money. And so because it's based on how much you ask for is how much you get, and then you have to build. So at any rate, so that's the 2 pots of money coming up plus the RCPP. I will say, and with what will happen with the new farm bill, this is an unprecedented time. If you're ever to create a program and start going for federal money, this is the time. Because I don't think we're ever going to see this kind of money again. Now maybe we will 10 years from now. I certainly won't be working in this 10 years old to be really retired by then, but maybe the demand will continue to increase, but the competition will increase too. So if you're going to get your foot in the door, now is the time. So the easement document looks like what you see on the right when it's finally recorded. It's a deed that maybe it's about 10 pages. Right now we follow, when we use federal money, which is most of the time, we follow what I have highlighted there, the minimum deed terms. I mean, some of the whereas, the preambles and all of that are about our program, but then we get into the content, and what can be done or not done is pretty much set by the federal government. And there can be a little bit of negotiation, but it's pretty much their money, their rules. And I know that there are some farmers and landowners that don't want anything to do with that. And But I've also had some that say that at the top, and then a few years later, they walk in the door and they're, the situation has changed for them and they want to explore it. And that's fine, because we don't want everybody coming through all at once, and, people have to learn and know what's right for them at a particular time. Okay, next one. So this is what I mentioned before about the agri-hoods. This is a nice, easy way to get into the program is, unless you've done a survey and kind of set it out there, you really don't know who might be interested in doing a donation. You might have someone who wants to do that, and then the cost of the transaction is really down. Or maybe there's a developer that wants to explore that idea of the agri-hood. Either way, you can set up, if you say, well, we don't have the money for the match yet. Well, one way to step into it kind of softly is to go about that, just setting up an ordinance so that you can't accept the donations and agri-hoods. Okay, next one. So the context of our program kind of is, I wanted to just show you there's a lot here that's happened since then. One of the things in this timeline that you'll see is that, and this really kind of happened after that, the mortgage crash in 2007, 8, 9, when all that was happening, we had so many issues with people just sustaining themselves and keeping a roof over their head and food on the table, that the interest by our board for committing funds for easements was really low at that point. And so there was kind of a informal pause, funding pause, but at the same time we had this real uptick in local food production and understanding the effect of local food production on our health and wellness and economy. And so that set off what is now a 20-year sub-program within the easement program, all on local foods. And, we've used various tools from a plan you see there, to health impact assessment, that ended up creating an ordinance called the Growing for Cane Ordinance that we support local food farms. Remember, we had just a handful when you are so much more diverse in McHenry County than we were at that time. We're growing, I think we're at about 50 to 60 food farms in our county now, but back then it really was a handful, and they were really going upstream to any kind of local food production. And so, there are a lot of these policies and plans. We looked at a food hub. I know the same consultant that worked with us worked with McHenry College on the food hub that's going to be there. So this is all coming, I think, for you as well. What we ended up doing within our Growing for Cane ordinance was to create an opportunity to do what are called term easements. So in other words, they're less than perpetual. We didn't give a term at all because we realized that would have to be individual per farm. Maybe somebody would want a 1 year, 10-year, 30-year, whatever. These are not funded by the federal government. They do not fund anything that's not in perpetuity. But we decided we would give ourselves the authority as a county to be able to enter into these agreements should we decide and get grant funds, for example, to support our farmers. We may want that security of a term easement that the land will stay in agriculture if we're going to fund the farm with special programming and special funding. We're not quite there yet. We're really close, but we've just been really busy with our more traditional easements. But I can see that as a possibility for you too, to go hand in hand with a permanent easement. And also those ag areas, in some states, those are required stepping stones to get into the program. You have to be in an ag area before you can apply. That's another route to kind of get people comfortable with that. There's lots of different ways you can package this. Okay, next slide. And then, I put this in here just as a reminder that it's all about partnerships in creating the programs. our board, working with 4-H, FFA, families, multi-generational families. We do have an agriculture committee of our county board, and that's been super helpful to bring policy recommendations that come from our commissions directly to the county board committee to hear your thoughts and staff's thoughts on what should happen next. Not everything we bring them are decisions. A lot of it is just education and moving forward, especially when you have a diverse county where not every elected official is from a farm area and because of their changeover. Okay, next slide. Okay, the cost. This is a question that comes up all the time. Well, what does it cost to do a transaction? I did this a while ago, and it's probably more expensive now because everything is more expensive. But just to give you an idea, these are the categories when you do your transaction. We pay for all of this. You could do that too. I think NRCS might pay for some of this if you ask. If you're participating in the federal program, you can fundraise for this. You could ask the landowner to do it. We pay for it just because that's something we wanted to encourage participation, but anyone could structure this the way they need to. But those are kind of like the essential steps, because at the end, you have a document that has to be treated as such, and so you have to record it, and then you have to annually inspect it to make sure that it's still in agriculture. Okay, next slide. And that's it, thank you. So now I can kind of mute my mic for a minute to listen to your questions if you have any, and then I can come back on.
Are we back on? Yep. Thank you, Janice. So far, we are in awe. We're all looking at the screens going, oh my goodness, that's a lot of things going on. So, Michelle, usually you have a good question in there.
So Janice already answered my question, which was like, what part of the Farm Bill this is nestled in, but this was very helpful. I think really appreciate, you being clear about if we are interested in a program like this, now is a really good time. And so I think we all, I don't know, I'm very interested in having this discussion and seeing where this would fit in our regional plan.
Ellie?
I agree. I mean, I honestly didn't know this existed before tonight, because I've worked on some conservation easements before on farms, like as part of my job, and I always thought they were really cool. So I didn't know the easement went further than just like conservation easement. You could do a whole farmland easement, which I think is something that can be really valuable here, because that's what we're worried about, solar development whatsoever.
Charlie?
Yeah, something I just learned at a zoning petition we had not long ago. The Land Conservancy of McHenry County buys easements. And
Yes.
this was a situation where a gentleman, the landowner, decided he wished to put a solar farm on land protected by the conservation easement. And we were advised by the state's attorney that since the Land Conservancy is not a government entity, that the state's attorney would not defend the easement, and that it was a matter for private parties to deal with among themselves. And apparently the solar farm is going on that parcel.
Oh my goodness.
Well, yeah, and I think that Janice did make the point that it probably is best for these things to be managed by the county.
Yeah, well, if it's a government agency, then the state's attorney pretty much has to.
Yes, they do.
But I was kind of shocked that that was the ruling by the state's attorney, and but they were quite clear.
So is that the same for any, like, private places doing easements? Like, I know BACT does easements too.
They said that they do not enforce private easements of any kind, period.
So we need this program, is what I'm hearing.
Well,
A version of it.
we need it to be through the county,
Yes.
through a government agency for it to really have any teeth.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Barry?
Nancy, I really enjoyed your presentation. I had a couple of questions. What percentage of the Kane County budget is used for farmland protection?
Okay, so I'm going to answer some of your questions. Let's start with the last question about the funding. So our funding comes from the Grand Victoria Riverboat directly to the county
Okay.
in an agreement that they have had for many, many years. In that agreement, the county must spend the money on education, environmental, and economic development. Our Farmland Protection Program has been the #1 recipient of funding. 22 million, over 23 million, something like that, allocated annually to the program.
Okay. Okay.
So when we started the program, the first decision was to put $5 million into our account and start off there. And then after that, I have to go before our Riverboat Board with a request for funding. And that went annually. And early years, I would ask for 2 or 3 million and then go from there every year. But then, as I said, when that mortgage crisis started and the housing crash and everything that was happening, the request before the riverboat started to become more about hunger and shelter, and their appetite for using funds for this dramatically decreased. There were a few years that it wasn't funded at all, and I was using funds from the previous program. And those funds in my budget are included. At the beginning, did not include my salary or any of my colleagues' salaries. Over the years, now all of my salary comes out of that account, although now I'm part-time. And then my colleagues, a portion of their salary, plus those transaction fees that you saw, plus the local match. Now this year, last couple years, I've asked for $500,000, which means we are only doing about 1 farm a year. So one of the things that's going to be happening shortly for me that they have charged me with is to help develop more diverse funding sources. That will be my job. So if you were to pursue a program, you're going to need someone who's going to be doing that.
Yep.
You might need a team of people that are doing that, looking at ways to pay for that local match. I mean, there's a variety of ways in programs around the country by creating a funding source within your government structure through general operations, or it could be something as simple as some people use a certain amount of the recording fee for documents. When recording documents come through, maybe they added a premium onto that, and then that's designated for the program. There's some simple things like that. There are more complex things, but I suggest a variety of things, if that makes sense, and not just to rely on local tax or local fees. But I will say, no one is going to invest in your program. No one outside is going to invest in your program if you don't provide a local match of some sort.
Right.
Because in this day and age of philanthropy and investment and all of those things, everyone asks for that. I do grant writing all the time, as well as seeking, investment. And there are grants out there to help, but everyone wants to know, well, what are you bringing to the table first for your community? And so that's the question you have to answer to do any of this work, to do any work, right? I mean, that's the way it is. Now, there's a ton of federal money out there, but right now it's a 50-50 match. With the new farm bill, will it become 80-20? Fingers crossed, but I don't know, right? The American Farm Bureau support an 80-20 split, 80 being federal, 20 being local, to open the program up to more people. Now, will the federal government listen to the American Farm Bureau on that? I don't know. But I'm grateful that they, that's a policy statement that they made when in the writing of this. Or will there be certain instances where, if an area is more vulnerable, that they will consider that, things like that. But there are two things. There's establishing the policy, and then there's the fundraising, right?
Absolutely.
And I see so many people get caught up in, we can't raise $22 million, so we can't do it at all. That's not, you can start very small. You can start with donations. You can start with that and start to build. Because it's almost like you have to build an appetite for it in order to measure the interest.
Does Kane County?
And you have some easements out there already that are held by the land trust, and so the advantage of that is they're available there.
And then my second question, Nancy, is does Kane County have a farmland set-aside ordinance, meaning that have you committed to maintaining farmland in Kane County? Because I know McHenry County has a 10%. We voted on a 10% farmland protection. Does Kane County have some ordinance like that?
When you say 10% and set aside, do you mean through your comprehensive plan?
Yeah, no, not on the comprehensive plan, but we voted on in the county that there be remaining at least 10% farmland always. Did Kane County vote on something like that?
Yes, through our conceptual land use strategy that I talked about with our comprehensive plan, that calls for 50% of the land area in the county to be agriculture and open space.
Okay.
And we have almost 50,000 acres in agriculture. Not all of it is on the western side. We did a map, which I suggest you do too, of asking your assessor to give you the parcel information to see where ag assessed land is. In other words, it's a really current existing. And you'll see how much agriculture is all over the place. I bet you're going to find the same thing. So yes, the goal is 50%, which ends up being about maybe, 35 to 40%, I'm going to guess, of total land base. But we also, their policies changed, or let's say improved or elevated with the Growing for Cane ordinance, where we said we recognize that agriculture is everywhere in the county, within the municipalities, east, west, north, south, so we would accept ag easements through Growing for Cane in all locations within the county. Not just like Western Corridor or whatever, because of the need to be able to grow in a variety of settings and a variety of products.
Thank you.
Pat?
Well, I guess the one thing I think is interesting is you said 50% is your goal for having ag set aside. And ours is only 10%, because 10% is not worth bothering with. And also, what are you?
10% is really low. I don't think your comp plan. I think you should look at. I'm sure you have your policy that says 10%, but when you look at your comprehensive plan policies, they're very ag supportive. And so, as well as your other ordinances like your stormwater ordinance and your water resource ordinance, all those things combined certainly add up to more land area. Now, again, like I said, that policy is for land use, not for the easement. Because the easement is totally voluntary. And so some people are never going to want to do an easement, and that's perfectly fine. But that doesn't mean that we aren't supporting them through comprehensive planning, zoning, all the resources that Spring talked about. And to be honest with you, we're spending a lot more time in that area right now because farmers need a lot of financial support through the federal programs, the conservation programs. And so, in a loose, without me getting too deep into this, I almost feel like, yes, land protection is a big part of what you need to do, but the other half is to pursue those conservation practice funds with the district, because there's a lot of money in that with the new IRA as well, and pursue that in the coming years so that you can have more of that, because farmers need both. They need that land protection, but they need the funding to be able to have their operations. And, you know, we all know that there's not enough money in the state programs. They run out for cover crops. It runs out for all of these. So for you to come up with a bucket that's just for your farms that you're managing, it consists in partnership with the districts, but in partnership with your comprehensive plan and your land trust, and with us to the south, then you know we start to make a big influence, which is what we have to do to get the attention of national people and investors and things like that. I mean, it's to a huge advantage for you to pursue more work. It's a huge advantage for us.
Oh, I'm not
It
saying
does
that we
raise the
should,
competition, but it raises money.
we need all the conservation, all the ag land conservation we can possibly get. I'm not saying 10%, but anything is good. Here's a question I have for you though. What's the average size of your farms in Kane County? And what is the average size of the equipment that's being used? And how about movement from farm to farm? How are you dealing with that? Because some of this equipment, which was never meant to be on roads, this equipment was meant to stay within a given farm. I'm talking about John Deere equipment, okay? It was never meant to go down the road into a different place. It was meant to stay on one farm because it's too wide for even 2 lanes of traffic. I'm wondering how, what's your situation down there with that? Size of farm, size of equipment, and how about how is it going with moving your equipment around? Because that's real important. It's impossible to keep farmland going and keep ag going if you can't farm it, if you can't have your equipment and have your correct size farm. Because if you're trying to farm 1,500 acres, say for instance, you need, and it's very capital intensive, and so your equipment is going to be huge, and that's a lot different from somebody farming 200 acres. Tell me about that.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do now is pull up the Census of Agriculture because I don't have the answer right off the top of my head, but you're right on the nose with this topic. I wanted to see if I could find it actual, but let me say a couple of things and see if I can find it in a minute for the average or median sized farm. It's probably going to be smaller than you have, number one. We have fragmentation is a huge topic. And actually, what some of the studies have shown, and that we study in Kane County, that some of the infiltration that everyone's concerned about may not just come from the farms, but they may come from the suburban estates that have several acres of sod around them and are fertilized, right? Super fertilized. So we have that problem. We have those huge mansion estates, right, kind of cutting in. We're trying to, once they're zoned and platted, there's not a whole lot you can do to stop them, but we're trying to prohibit and not encourage more of that. I'm going to guess that the average or median-sized farm that comes through for easement is probably 80 acres. or we've got some that are smaller, but you could see those clusters, and what ends up happening is we've got adjacency, and over time. And then the other thing that has happened is that, when you are ranking, we had a flood of applications, and we still have a waiting list. We've always had a waiting list. So if one of the ways you can prioritize applications in terms of who's going to get funded next is you can rank using adjacency as a way to move them up the list a bit, so that you start to get blocks. They may not be owners, you might have large areas, but they might not all be under one owner. Regarding the, there in Kane and probably McHenry now too, there is no farmland that comes up on the market. It comes up on the market for farmland. It comes up on the market with a development value with someone who's speculating or testing to see if they can get a value. But if you want a farm, there is no farm. That's where we're at right now. And if that was solidified as, within this time of this program. So if you want a farm, you have to have, you have to have an arrangement with someone and that's how it's not going to come officially on the market. But I will tell you that people that want to, so if you want to expand your operations, you can't do it by adding land, which is with the corn and bean rotation, that's how you make more money, right? So what people have been doing is farming elsewhere. And in fact, some of the people early in the program were taking their money down to central Illinois and farming down there, farming in both places. Of course, a lot of counties in central Illinois weren't real happy about that because we were bringing our, Chicago dollar down there and outpricing some of their farmers, but that's the market, right? So now I think that our younger, more earlier in their career farmers, they have to do that if they're going to only do corn and beans and only go by expansion. But that state of only expanding by adding acres because you're not going to, diversify your products, I think that's going to come to a close because soon, because no matter where you look in the state, you still have that challenge. And the value of farmland, we're one of the highest, the states with probably one of the highest ad value. So all of that kind of getting to equipment is not only the equipment if you're expanding your operation, trying to get more land. It's not only the equipment here, but they might need that equipment because they're also farming, further south. So all of that is a big challenge, and I think that's why we're going to see more crop diversity over time. It's not easy to change an operation from corn to beans. That's not something you do really quick, right? Sorry, my phone's going off. I had it on mute. Let me make sure that I fix that. But yes, all these things are part of the challenge.
Sure.
Janice?
It's a long discussion, and I think I started by saying, we can continue the conversation later with specific.
We may have some questions for you for later, that as we ruminate over this and figure out everything that we've heard tonight, which to me is almost mind-boggling, I'm sure we'll have more questions. If you don't mind us running it through Renee and get some more information from you, and maybe we can have you back at some time with just you answering more questions for maybe a half an hour someplace. We've got about six months to go to actually get this all finished, and I want this to be the best educated group of people working on this that we can have. So if the more questions they have, the better off we are, and no need to reinvent the wheel if we can rely on some of the things from Kane County or from any other counties that we know of that are working on these kind of programs. So again, thank you very much, appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Janice, right?
Okay.
Looked like Nancy got up as well.
Let's talk.
Well, for what it's worth, that's okay. If that, because now we either have a little bit of discussion or we have member comments, which is a little bit of discussion. So,
I'm actually still here. I'm actually still here.
Nancy, yay! Do you have any comments about what we just heard?
Well, she was a phenomenal wealth of information. She was amazing. I hope you can hear me okay. And I'm so proud, as somebody that grew up in Kane, I'm so proud.
Good. Randy, anything?
Well, you know, I think the program that that they've initiated in King County is phenomenal. You know, there is a chicken egg thing, right? You got the chicken, which is this program that is it's a necessity that we develop this kind of program here. You know, with this land use green is far more than 10% of what we'd like to think, right? It's far more than what Kane County has, by sure, by a lot of stretch. I think it's important that we think about initiating a program like this. And, you know, it's kind of equated to, that movie that said that if you build it, they will come. I think if you conserve it, they will stay. I think that's a little bit different than if you build it, they will come, right? I think it's a phenomenal thought process and phenomenal program. And I think we ought to begin to initiate it and worry about how it's going to be paid later.
Okay.
Okay,
Renee.
so the good news is we have the program. It's on the books.
There you go. See, yes.
And what are we doing about them?
We have it. It needs a little refinement, but it's there. We already have that. But they just never, there was a committee established and they did the conservation areas, the ag conservation areas, but there was never funding for actually buying the development rights. So interest kind of waned and it kind of went away. But step one is we have to say in the comprehensive plan, this is a priority.
No question.
We have to do this. And that's the first step of getting that program reinitiated and,
Well, I think that that's right. And over the last decade, it was a political imperative that every year you cut things and you never added anything that cost a penny. And that was the politics of McHenry County for the teens. And I think that that's changed rather considerably in the last 2 or 3 years. And the county is starting to spend more money here and there very cautiously. And I think that if we say that this is a major priority, that it might get a few pennies out of the county. But we cut our rate of taxation in a number of ways over the 2010s. And now the economy is roaring back, so even after the cuts, revenue was pretty good, though not nearly what it would have been if we hadn't cut the tax rates in some spots. But I think there is an opportunity now to at least get a small start. But as with all prosperous times, it's more expensive to buy these rights than it was a few years ago.
they can always lease to a solar farm.
Well, and the second thing, besides doing this program, is we have to find what other sources there are to get money besides me or you.
Well, and like Janice said, there's more money right now than there's ever been before.
Yeah.
So that's
How
kind
do you
of
get to
the
it?
job of the comprehensive plan, is to set this policy and educate
Right.
the policymakers
Right.
on the issue.
I say we say we're from Ukraine.
You're whispering, Pat. Carolyn, what do you think might be going on with the county? Or does that sound like that's something that they would be receptive to? No?
Question.
You're putting her on
Well, a little bit because, I mean, a little bit because, I mean, I think if you go back, if you look at how everybody runs for office, it's about I'm going to cut taxes. Okay, and then so, yeah, you had a period of time when I was also in the conservation district, and there was a period of time where, I mean, even the conservation district didn't raise their taxes, they didn't take their levy, you know,
Right.
10, 11, 12, 13 years in a row. And then there was a time when we tried to, and then we had to dial it back because of that reduction that I think you're referring to. And unfortunately, that has helped. Now they've got to kind of work really hard to kind of catch up for all that. And part of it, you know, part of it was pressure not to do so, but part of it was out of respect for during like the housing market, not wanting to put people in a position who are already suffering to have to pay more taxes. Right? And then it was the pandemic, and so things keep popping up. So I really don't know because you've got you know, the mental health board is really struggling right now to get dollars out to people who need them, and more people need assistance, and I think we're on par to double the suicide rate this year over last year. And so I think there's a lot of pressure. So can I speak to that? Not really.
I understand.
Well, they're sure we can't put a boat on the Kishwaukee River.
No, and I was wondering when because she did say, well, that money kind of fell off, and then I wasn't sure. Well, it sounded like, at first I thought that money just was no longer available. It sounds like what happened was that money is now going towards other things. Because she said that later. Because when she said that, I thought, well, we are getting a lot of these gaming rooms. I mean, they're everywhere. But a lot of them are within municipalities, so that money's going to them. But I don't know, it's not going to be like a casino, you know, that's right. But I don't know if there's some opportunities with some of those kinds of things.
People just gamble online now, though. Like, at least the young people who gamble, which is questionable. It's all through apps and through betting apps and through stuff like that. So that's revenue lost, per se. I think she was kind of referring to that. There's a lot of different ways people gamble now.
Yeah.
I stopped in the gas station this afternoon and there were like 8 people all lined up on these money button machines.
So
Precedent.
What?
These money button machines are like slot machines. They're not really slot machines. They're just press a button.
I want to just add to that real quickly. Because we were eating out last night and somebody came in long enough probably to lose. You tried 3 times and worked out. So, you know, at some level you're getting your money from people probably who you shouldn't be getting it from. They probably really could stand to keep their money. Sorry, I need to throw that in there.
Michelle?
I think for the purposes of this group, we're all in agreement that we need to emphasize that this is a priority.
It's one of the things that we're going to bring up to the county board eventually.
Yeah, and it's kind of
Okay.
up to Carolyn and her colleagues at the county board to figure out where it falls in the priorities, you know? Like, our group thinks that it's a priority for the purposes of the comprehensive plan, and it's up to, you know, the elected body to figure that out.
So you said we already, and that's a good point, because then how do we build on that? Because right now they're asking for input on, you know, is there anything else we want to add to the strategic plan, not necessarily, you know, more current. You said we already have something like that. Obviously, it's not something that it draws a lot of attention, and it probably isn't precisely what they're doing, obviously, because of the different things. But
It's pretty close because I actually worked on this when I worked here before in the mid-90s. Because that's when we all started doing this kind of stuff. And it's the ordinance that's on our books that establishes the agricultural conservation easement group. It's in Title II of our county code. So it's still on the books, but the group just kind of gave up and lost interest over time. But, yeah.
would there be any value in you sending that out to us and having us look at it and say, how do we build from here?
I can do that.
You know, how do we revise this?
I only just noticed, because I'm in the process of revising the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance, that if someone wanted to donate their development rights, any transfer development rights, for some reason in McHenry County, those development rights are held by the Historic Preservation Commission. So it needs some tweaking.
We need some real tweaking.
It needs some tweaking, but we have it. I mean, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel at all. We already have something on the books here. But then I think the other thing, though, that I will point out that Janice was touched on a little bit is, aside from this program, there are other things that you guys as a plan commission can certainly do to help with the land use issues of these state residential and that sort of thing, things that can be an impediment to farming.
What do you mean?
Well, like Janice was saying that they have a lot of large estates.
Right.
We do too.
Right.
And we talked about, Pat brought up the idea of fractured agricultural land. Well, that's how it gets fractured, is with these large lot subdivisions and the introduction of these estate districts.
Isn't that something that we would be handling more in our zoning ordinance about how?
Well, you have to set the policy first with the
Oh, I see what
comprehensive
you're
plan
saying. I
sets the
see.
policy.
That drives then that change to the zoning.
And the county board universally ignores it. When
What
we
do you mean?
vote,
We don't follow it?
yes, when the zoning board says unanimously something that flatly violates those rules, you vote, last time, you voted almost unanimously to overrule us.
No, which one?
Carolyn
Shell
did
House?
it. Shell House.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. I was angry.
Yeah.
I wasn't the only one. Oh, I
No,
might
you
have
weren't
been.
the only one, but it was
No,
an
no, no.
overwhelming majority.
No, and that prompted me to go back to PED to talk about the fact that we need to have better education as a board, because we're on what zoning is and what we're supposed to be following, because we're now having that same issue with the solar panels.
Yeah.
And that is confusing, especially when you get people who are basically against solar because they think it's so anti-farm, but at the same time, there are certain things that we already have on the books that we need to be following. For the most recent one, Surya,
Yeah.
it was 9-7.
Mhm.
And it was, Surya was following our old rules.
Yeah.
So it wasn't because it was under the new rules, it's just
Yeah.
suddenly this, not suddenly, but I think that there's something else going on there, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure what it
But
is.
Shell House really stuck in my craw
Ah,
because he was a nice young man.
I know.
Well, understand that you've got people here who
Yeah.
have no idea.
I'm
what
sorry,
they're talking
I
about.
better shut up.
Well, it was really to get to the point that this is where some of the fragmentation comes into, because it was an Ag 1, and it wanted to go to, it ended up, should have gone to, an Ag 2 or
An estate.
an estate. But because of the filing, though, the paperwork, when something happened, it was put in as a residential 1. So residential 1 is for subdivisions, that's your highest density possible. So we had this piece of land now that's sitting out there at R1, and that starts the process, right? 10 years from now, nobody's gonna understand that really should have been zoned that way. So we made how did I say it, the wrong decision for the right reason. I mean, he was appropriate for that land, but it needed to be rezoned, and we didn't do it.
And it has been that way forever.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
So it's nothing new.
It is nothing new. It depends on the feeling that the board gets and how many constituents get hold of you. It's kind of saying,
It's politics.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and the argument was you putting the people first, not politics, and it's like, but making it about the people made it political. It was exactly the opposite of what I think that the feeling, right.
Well, you know, the estate residential future land use draft says that 19.21% of our future land use is going to be in estate residential.
Well, that's what is on, that was meant to shock you guys, because
Well-
that's what's actually on the books right now. If you take all the municipal comprehensive plans and put
Where is
them
that?
down, then that is, yes,
That's the
that's shocking.
modeling, like business as
20%
usual
20%
modeling.
of your land is gonna be in big dudes, big blocks.
So next month,
So, next month we'll have HLA back here.
yes. And they'll be bringing you those, the model scenarios
Yeah,
based on that base information.
right.
So you'll really be getting into that future land use plan and setting that policy for land use at the next meeting.
And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's co-done. Thank you. And she was done by before 8 o'clock, and it's now only 8:15, not my fault. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, tell me, what do we work with this JARS thing?